Let's talk tariffs. This is the day after the self-proclaimed Liberation Day for the US. So this is Tariff Day. We're going to talk about what happened in the markets, why it happened, and what possibly could happen coming up shortly because of the tariffs and in this scenario. Because things have changed. There's a lot of confusion about what the tariffs are, how they get applied, and who pays what. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I also want to talk about the markets because that's important. How this impacts the markets. Today, the market said we don't like what we saw. And we'll talk about if that's going to continue or not as well. So let's start by saying that, to begin with, my personal position on tariffs, as I said before, is that tariffs don't make any sense whatsoever, except for national security issues. And also if a country is dumping product into your country. Other than those two situations, there shouldn't be tariffs. Okay, that's out of the way. The next fact is that the US has actually been taken advantage of by other countries for forever, for a long, long time here. So this Bank of America graph shows you the G20 countries. It shows you the tariff rates, both the tariff and non-tariff trade barriers. And the US has the least amount of trade barriers. Yeah, so that's something that most people don't know. So it's not a level playing field. The US has been taken advantage of from a tariff situation. Now, the non-tariff trade barriers could be a number of things, like asking to change product coming into the country, or special handling of treatment of products coming in, or something else above and beyond a tax for a product coming in. So Trump yesterday came out and announced this baseline tariff of 10% for countries, and adjusted by the tariff itself by country, and said based upon the tariffs that are being charged right now. Now, I have to say, Trump held up a big, huge sign that said that here are the tariff rates for the different countries, and here's what we're going to charge. We're giving them a discount. It's kind of like a car sales with options and saying, here's how much of a discount you're getting, so you should be grateful. But let's take a look at something like South Korea, which is the top of his placard that he was using. The tariff rate there that the White House is saying is 50%, which would include tariffs and other trade barriers. Well, in 2021, South Korea signed a free trade agreement with the US, and virtually all products between the two countries don't have tariffs. There are no tariffs. So how did they get 50%? Well, the way that the White House calculated that number was not by the tariff rate or even by some of the other non-trade barriers. What they did was they looked at the trade deficit and said, if there's a trade deficit with the US with that country, that's because of trade barriers. And therefore, because there's a large trade deficit from the US to South Korea, there's a 50% tariff and trade barrier. That's not the right way to do it, because South Korea could be making a lot of products that the US wants, and they're buying them. But South Korea may say, well, we're sourcing our products because we don't have the same tastes. We're sourcing our products from Asia, like China, Japan, other countries. So we're not buying as many products. You can't expect it to be by country one for one all the time. That's just the way it works. And there's a whole circuitous argument about how trade deficits work as well. So the column on the left that Trump was holding up on his placard, those numbers are really just made up, despite there being an unfair advantage towards the US. It's going to be very difficult for South Korea to fight this. How do they fight this and say, well, you've now put a 34% tariff on us. What do we do to actually make this lower? Our tariff of 50%, how do we make it lower? Well, what do they have to do? There's not much they can do, and that's the problem. And I've just used South Korea as an example, but there's a whole bunch of other countries in a similar situation as well. So we could see the whole tariff debacle drag out for quite some time, because countries are going to be at a loss to be able to respond properly and work this out. Now, so far, after the announcement, we've seen some countries come out and say, well, we're just going to hold off right here. I'm trying to take action against the U.S. We're just going to try, we'll give it a little while, we'll see what we can negotiate, and then we'll come up with some counter tariffs. It seems that cooler head is prevailing. We did see in Canada, I'm not going to name politicians' names, but we did see some politicians say things like, we're going to inflict as much pain as possible on the U.S., and let me add some quotes here, and to us as well in Canada, and which made no sense at all. And we also saw another politician say that the relationship with Canada, with the U.S. is over, and we should be looking to get a closer relationship with the European Union, the UK, and France. That does not make sense whatsoever. Canada does not want a closer relationship with the EU. Sure, free trade barriers, I get it, but the economies in the EU are an absolute mess. I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of other stuff that's happening in the EU, but these were just some knee-jerk reactions that were taking place. Hopefully, we do see some cooler heads prevailing here as far as that goes. If we take a look at what happened with Canada, basically nothing. Yeah, big nothing burger as compared to what was there before. In other words, if it's USMCA, if we take a look here, we do see a little bit of a flooding situation here. On the path, it's a beautiful day today, but we did see a big snowstorm here yesterday. It's been an absolutely brutal winter, quite cold and lots of snow. But if we take a look what happened with Canada, in the end, Canada was actually received favorable treatment compared to other countries. Not that there should be tariffs placed on Canada. Now, Canada does have tariffs on the U.S. as well. There's no question. We've got a whole bunch of tariffs on things like chicken and milk and butter and cheese and some of the agricultural products. These tariffs shouldn't exist, but we do, and there's other products as well. But overall, we have a very low tariff regime outside of those things with the U.S. But the U.S. has come along. Now we have this tariff on steel and aluminum of 25%, and with products that are USMCA compliant, there is no tariff on those products except for the component that is not USMCA compliant, and then specifically cars. It would measure how much of the car is actually produced in the US. So I don't think this is the right thing to do, but this is the way it is right now. But relative to the rest of the world, Canada is actually okay at this point. Now, the markets did not like this overall. We saw the markets respond very negatively right across the board, and this could be problematic. What we've seen in the past was we did see the stock market drop down because of tariff announcements or some adjustment taking place on tariffs. And then we saw it bounce back because everybody said, oh, Trump's going to now use this as a negotiating tactic, and then he pulled back on the tariffs. This actually could take longer to work out than what we've seen in the past. This is a list of countries with individual tariffs, and some countries are going to come and try and negotiate this with them as well. But as I gave the example of South Korea, this is a very difficult thing to try and negotiate. And right now, you may see some negotiation in the background, and then some counter tariffs in a few weeks as well. And from Canada's perspective, Trump has basically said he's not negotiating with Canada right now. He's going to wait until after the election and negotiate with Poilievre or Carney or whoever wins the election. So Canada's on hold where we are right now. So my point is that this is just going to be tougher for the markets overall. So this is not a situation that can be worked out very shortly, very quickly. It's going to take quite some time to actually try and negotiate back and forth. There's going to be some posturing that takes place. It doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot of threatening at this point, which is good. We shouldn't be getting too emotional about this whole thing. But nevertheless, the markets will not like this. All tariffs and cutting back on trade is going to have a huge effect on the global economy. The world was really fracturing regardless of the tariffs as well. This isn't something that has caused everything. This is all part of the same fracturing problem. We're seeing this around the world with increased geopolitical tensions, etc. But there's no question that these tariffs are not helping that situation. And it's going to hurt economies, including the U.S. economy in the short term. Now, the U.S. has said basically that, well, we might be going through a detox period. That's Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary. And yeah, they might be going through a detox period. I think the Trump administration is trying to basically front load all their pain and get it all out of the way, clean it all up. And yes, there'll be some pain, and then hopefully be better off in a year or two down the road. I think that's their objective. And Europe, on the other hand, is spending money like crazy, trying to keep artificially inflating the economy. Recently, Germany announced a huge government spend program. Europe's announced a military, like a Keynesian militarization program as well. They're really trying to boost their economy through government spending at this time, which in the short term can help boost the economy. It's probably not the right thing in the long term, but in the short term can keep it going. And what we're seeing right now is we are seeing U.S. market, the U.S. stock market, really pull back relative to most countries around the world. So Europe's done better, UK's done better, Japan's done better. Whoa, it's really windy here today. Extremely windy. That's why I'm wearing my hat here. So we're seeing all these countries perform better than the US in 2025. And part of that has been that the US dollar has been falling. And the Trump administration is fine with that. It's helping promote their own manufacturing industry. But why is the US dollar falling? Well, one of the reasons is that foreign investors have been selling their technology stocks. When they sell their technology stocks, they transfer back into their local currency. So they're selling USD, which puts downward pressure on the USD. And we're seeing that take place. Also, there's some concerns because they're introducing policies to really try and clean up the system, that they could be moving towards a recession. And we could start to see more rate cuts come from the Federal Reserve. In fact, we're seeing the probability of rate cuts increase just recently as well. So that's putting downward pressure on the US dollar relative to world currencies. In the past, when we've seen real risk-off mode, we'd see the US dollar rally. That's not what's taking place here. And we see countries have lost a lot of their appetite to buy US dollars at this point. So how does this work itself out in the market? Well, we probably could see the stock market actually continue to head lower. Now, we have in the past, around the tariff announcement, seen the stock market pop up quickly afterwards because it was viewed as the art of the deal, and it was a temporary situation, and adjustments were made, and it was all part of the negotiation factor. But this is going to be a longer term process, I believe. So we could see some further negative pressure on the markets. Now, maybe the stock market bounces up for a few days here and has a bit of a rally because it did sell off, and investors look at it and go, oh, it's buy the dip, buy the dip. That's possible here as well. But this could be a little bit longer to work out. Now, on a seasonal basis, we do see the stock market starting to move into its weaker seasonal period in early May. So we're not that far away. We're really about a month away from that. And sometimes we see the stock market actually peak out in mid-April once the earnings season gets underway. Now, we do have earnings starting very shortly. We got the banks in the US releasing their earnings starting on April the 11th, which is just around the corner. If we see some really strong earnings come in and banks give some good forecasts on a go-forward basis, that really could turn things around and really help to move the market higher. But on the other hand, we could actually be moving into this period where we're moving into the seasonal period earlier, and we're starting to see that weakness in the market. And so if we take a look at some of the other parts of the market, government bonds in the US have actually been performing well. If we take a look at the 10-year yield, it's still above 4%. We have seen it drop quite a bit, but it's possible we could see it drop quite a bit further. Government bonds tend to do well starting in early May. Maybe it started early this year. Some of the defensive sectors in the market, they've actually been doing quite well. And today they're performed relatively well. So the healthcare sector, utilities, consumer staples as well. So those sectors tend to perform well in the shoulder season coming into the 6-month unfavorable period for the market. The cyclicals and growth sectors, they can have some problems here. And we have seen some real weakness taking place in those sectors here, and maybe this is where they start to roll over a bit. But at this point, in order for the markets to do really, really well, we either need to see really strong earnings or guidance on a go-forward basis, or we need to see some quick resolutions taking place with the countries on the whole trade, and then the belief is that this is all going to be solved quickly, which I don't believe is going to happen. So right now I'd say there's probably more downside probability for the stock market versus upside, despite being in the strong seasonal period, the last part of the strong seasonal period. It's going to be interesting once again. Thank you very much for joining me today.